Let's go back in time and explore one of Scotland's most iconic landmarks, the Edinburgh Castle. This castle is located at the top of the Royal Mile, at the west end of Edinburgh's Old Town, and it has been occupied by humans since at least the Iron Age. There has been a royal castle on the rock ever since the 12th century, and the site continued to be a royal residence up until the 1600s. By the 17th century, it was mainly used as a military barracks, with a large garrison. This castle guarded great moments in history, but it has also suffered many sieges. In fact, it is the most besieged place in Britain. But let us walk inside and see some of the many highlights of this Scottish icon. This is the Esplanade. It was built as a parade ground in the 17th century and it was extended a century later. The gatehouse at the head of the Esplanade was built as an architecturally cosmetic addition to the castle in 1888. The road, built by James III in 1464 for the transport of cannons, leads upward and around to the north of the Half Moon Battery and the Four-Wall Battery to the Porticus Gate. The Portcullis Gate was built in the late 1500s to replace the Ground Constable's Tower, which was destroyed in one of the sieges. A new structure was built in the 19th century and named the Argyll Tower, from the fact that the 9th Earl of Argyll had been held there prior to his execution in the 1600s. Just inside the gate, there is the Argyll Battery overlooking Princes Street, with Millsmouth Battery, which is the location of the 1 o'clock gun, which is this cannon that fires every day at 1 o'clock. Below this, there is also the Low Defense, in which you find the Wellhouse Tower built in 1362 to guard St. Margaret's Well. This natural spring provided an important secondary source of water for the whole castle, and the water being lifted up by a crane mounted on a platform known as the Crane Bastion. The areas to the north and west of the Argyll Tower are largely occupied by military buildings erected after the castle became a major garrison in the early 18th century. The governor's house to the south was built in 1742 as an accommodation for the governor, storekeeper, and master gunner, and was used until the post of governor became vacant in the late 19th century. It was then used by nurses of the castle hospital. West of the governor's house, a store of 4 munitions was built in the 1700s and later extended to form a courtyard in which the main gunpowder magazine also stood. A century later, the area was remodeled as a military hospital, formerly housed in the Great Hall. The great building to the south of this courtyard is now the National War Museum of Scotland, which includes a wide range of military artifacts, such as uniforms, medals, and weapons. The exhibits also illustrate the history and causes behind the many wars in which Scottish soldiers have been involved. Fox Gate. This was the only gate to the highest part of the castle rock. The origin of this name is unknown, although it was formerly known as the Foggy Gate, which may relate to the dense sea fogs which commonly affect Edinburgh. The summit of the rock is occupied by St. Margaret's Chapel and this huge cannon called the Mons Meg. Here you will also find a small 19th century dog cemetery for the burial of the soldiers' regimental mascots. And next to it, you will have one of the finest spots to take pictures, see the city, and meditate and pray at St. Margaret's Chapel. This is St. Margaret's Chapel, and this is one of the oldest buildings in the whole castle, one of the 12th century structures surviving in any Scottish castle. It was built as a private chapel for the royal family and dedicated to St. Margaret of Scotland, who died in the castle in 1093. The chapel is still used for religious ceremonies such as weddings. I wonder how much it will cost to get married over there. This is the Half Moon Battery. This battery was also built around and over the ruins of David's Tower. David's Tower was rediscovered during routine maintenance work in the 20th century. Several rooms are accessible to the public, although the lower parts are generally closed. Crown Square, also known as Palace Yard, was laid out in the 15th century during the reign of King James III as the principal courtyard of the castle. The foundations were formed by the construction of a series of large stone vaults built onto the uneven castle rock in the 1430s. The square is formed by the Royal Palace to the east, the Great Hall to the south, the Queen Anne Building to the west, and the National War Memorial Museum to the north. The Royal Palace comprises the former royal apartments, which were the residence of the later Stuart monarchs. It was built in the mid-15th century during the reign of James IV. Then it was extensively remodeled for the visit of James VI to the castle in 1617, when the state apartments for the king and queen were built. On the ground floor there is the Lych Hall, now called the King's Dining Room, and there is also a small room known as the Birth Chamber or Mary Room, where James VI was born to Mary, Queen of the Scots, in June of 1566. The Great Hall was the chief place of state assembly in the castle, and is thought to have been completed in the early years of the 16th century. The decorated carved stone corbels supporting the roof have Renaissance detailing, which indicates that the arts in Scotland were relatively advanced at this time. This great hall hosted grand banquets and state events, but the king had little time to enjoy his new addition. James IV died at the Battle of Flodden in 1513 when he was fighting the English forces sent by his brother-in-law, King Henry VIII. Sounds familiar? The Scottish National War Memorial occupies a converted barrack block on the north side of the Crown Square. It stands on the site of the medieval St. Mary's Church. The memorial commemorates Scottish soldiers and those serving with the Scottish regiments who died in the two world wars and in more recent conflicts. This memorial is maintained by a charitable trust. There is so much more to see inside this castle that a day will not be enough. This castle is Scotland's most visited place, bringing over 2 million people every year. And it's also the second most visited place in the whole United Kingdom. When you go to Edinburgh, plan on spending a day in this castle, but make sure you purchase your tickets online in advance, so you can fully experience one of Scotland's most iconic landmarks.